I'm going to do a speaker check to make sure my speaker works. Yes, it does. And now I'm going to continue our example where we left off. So we left off building this design and we started in on some code. We made a couple global variables and we made one line of code in the section of code called form load, which you can get to by double clicking the form, gets you to the code called form load. And that's where we're going to pick up with today, is our example is going to pick up right there. Okay, so the idea with this program is it's going to pick two random numbers. We're going to pick two random numbers and store them, remember them, in our global variables. Global variables are sometimes just shortened to just globals. People call them globals, okay? The cool kids call them globals. By first, we're going to create a random number generator. It's a line of code that will generate random numbers. You saw that in the presentation yesterday, and here's how it works. You're going to make a line of code that says, and let me type it first, then I'll zoom in on it. Random equals new random. But I want to point out a couple things about this line because it can be tricky. Okay? So you're saying the word random 3 times. However, the first time uses a capital R here, and then over here it uses a capital R. So in those 2 places, I use a capital R. However, right here, I'm using a lowercase r right there. Okay? So random equals new. That's also an interesting keyword we haven't maybe seen before. The keyword new. And there's 2 round brackets right there. Now, I don't want to explain in too much detail what this line is because in a lot of ways you have to really take Computer Science 30S to really understand the full scope of what's going on in this line. All you really need to know is this is a line of code that's going to create something to make random numbers. Also, this word right here, random, could literally be anything. We could have called it X or potato or whatever. Whatever word we put there is really irrelevant, okay? So I just think it's easier to just say random equals new random. It's kind of has a lyrical sort of a position to it. But we generate that. And now we're going to use it. We're going to use the random number generator, okay? Now, something to know about this, and I'm putting it down as a remember. And remember is interesting because I haven't told you yet, but remember that when we do this, you're going to see 2 numbers appear. The second number is always 1 more. Okay, here's what I mean. We're going to be generating a random number between 1 and 5. So what I'm going to do is using my global variable, number 1, I'm going to say you are equal to random. Notice I'm using the lowercase version of random. Dot, and then the word is next, which essentially just means give me the next random number you can think about, random number generator. And then you're going to once again use rounded brackets right there. And inside the round brackets, you're going to put 2 numbers. So I said, give me a random number between 1 and 5. This second number, you always shoot it past 1 more. It's just a quirk with the way that code works, okay? So this will generate a random number between 1 and 5, even though I say 1, 6. Sometimes when we use other people's code, we have to sort of abide by the sort of sets of rules that they set up. And so that's how it's going to go. Now I'm going to make my second number, number 2. It also equals something random. Give me the next random number you can think of. And with the second random number, it's between 1 and 3. So I put 1, 4. It's always 1 more. Okay. So really, these are the only 3 lines of code I've typed so far. So far, I've typed these 3 lines of code and a lot of comments. The comments are to help you guys explain this. No, I get that you guys don't necessarily have time to type in all these comments as you are sort of following the example. You can always get the comments later. At the end of the example, I'll show you how. Okay. Now, the next thing is kind of an optional thing. We're going to set what's called the focus. And what that means is the program goes to that thing. Okay, so let me put the line of code in, and then when we run it, you'll kind of have a feel for what it does. TXT first, that's the name of my text box, dot focus. And like a lot of these lines of code, it will have those round brackets again. The round brackets are going to show up every once in a while. There's a reason for that. And again, in this course, I don't really go into the detail. But if you are interested in more detail, you can certainly take the Computer Science 30S course. Just all you really need to know is that sometimes round brackets appear for a line of code to do an action. So let's see what happens. If I hit play, it's going to try to do this first, show a message box. And the second I hit play, you'll notice that the message box will appear. So yes, it was able to accomplish that line 43 right there. Once I click OK, it's going to do line 48, 52, and 53 immediately. So it is we don't see that though, but in the background, what's happened is it has generated some random number. Let's say it was the number 2. And it's remembering it. And some random number here, let's say it was the number 3. The user can't see those because these are stored in variables inside the computer. But it did that. It did what we just said right there. But now what about this line? Well, what that line does is, I don't know if you can see on my screen right now, but there's a little flashing line right there. That's called the focus, okay? So if I was to put, don't do this in your example, TXT second, right? TXT first, and I was to rerun it, notice that that's where the little flashing, man, didn't do it. Okay. Why didn't it do it? Should have done it. Something else is overriding it. Anyways, that's what that does. I just wanted that in there as an example. A student asked me that, like on the test averager program. How do I get the flashing cursor back in the text box? Well, that's how you do it. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we now go do the majority of our code inside of the button, the guess button? Okay, again, if you're having trouble following this code, then you might want to, again, go to not the hints, not the assignments, not the video, not the assignment, but here under examples, conditional statements part 2, you can follow along at a slower pace, right? If you want to go back and do it later. I have some of the same comments in here, although I think the ones I'm putting in now are a little more detailed. All right, let's go to the button. And just before we start coding the button, let's do a quick attendance check for the couple students I had marked absent, see if they did show up. And I see the answer is no. And yes, okay. Ephraim, you are now marked present. Okay, so the only absent I had was Barrett. Okay. And what happened to Brendan? Brendan dropped out. So I'm going to put requests in for those two to get back in. Okay. So now we're going to go and do this guess button. Okay. So let's think of it kind of a piece at a time. So what's the first thing we're going to need to do? Well, we're going to retrieve, pull out of the user's guesses from the text boxes. So the user's going to type in a guess here and a guess here, and then they're going to click this button. So let's say they typed in a 1 and a 2 right here. I have to take those two guesses and pull them out of the text box and store them in a variable, right? So that I can remember what the user guessed. So we're going to do that. And we've done this before. We did this all the way back in our other units. But this time we're going to, now that you guys are getting a little more confident with this stuff, I hope, we're going to do this. We're going to do two things at once. Okay? We're going to get the text box text, and convert that text into a number, all in one line of code. Normally we do this in 2 lines. Let me show you what it would normally look like. You do something like, don't do this yet. You'd go like string value equals txt first text, then like int number equals convert dot to integer that value. And there's nothing wrong with those 2 lines of code. Those 2 lines of codes are very good. You've been doing them since the variables unit. But now that you're getting a little more comfortable with this, we can do this all at once. And we can use our global variable, right? Well, not this case. In this case, we're going to create a variable called guess1. It's going to be an integer. Okay. So guess1 equals convert dot to int32. What's in txt? So this is the same code. It's just now, instead of doing it in 2 lines of code, I'm taking the text box and I'm converting it into an integer. Then you're going to do that all over again for guess2 and for txt second. If you start to learn your little copy and paste commands, this example can go a lot quicker than just a typing exercise, right? And I think that's generally a good skill to learn out of this course, is some of those keyboard commands to make your life a lot easier. Unless you absolutely love typing, that's going to make your life go a little faster. Okay. So now that we have those 2 variables, they each store the guesses that the user made. We're going to basically see, does guess1 match up with number 1? Does guess2 match up with number 2? But before we do that, we're going to create some true, false Boolean variables. We haven't used these yet. I explained them in the variables unit, but I said you probably wouldn't need them, and you don't really need them, but it's a good opportunity to try and use them here. To remember, if we guess each. Now, Boolean variables are also known sometimes as flag variables. Okay, or flags. Because they basically flag whether I guessed it or not, like holding up a flag in a flag game where it's like, oh, you got it now. The flag has been raised. So we're going to create a Boolean variable called got first. Did I get the first number? And I'm going to assume that I haven't. So false. I'm going to create a second Boolean. Got second. Also going to assume it to be false. So these 2 variables just store true and false values. That's it. And I'm going to assume that I haven't found the first number or found the second number yet. But now comes our if statement. Now we check the first number versus the first guess to see if they match up. So we can do this by making a decision, by making an if statement. If, okay, guess1 equals number 1. That's the first part of an if statement, right? Does the guess match the number? Or is this thing equal to this thing? This is either going to be true, which means it would go to the code right here once we have code there, And if it's false, it'll move on to something else. Know that about gift statements. So if the user got it, okay, let's flag it, and tell our user. So got first equals now true. So it started off false. Now I've set it to true. I've flagged it. And now we can use our label. LBL first dot text equals the word correct. So I'm going to tell the user that they got the first one right. So I'm just going to test just this piece of code right now. It's only going to work with this first text box, right? So I'm just going to put a 1 in there and a 1 in there. Nothing happened. 2 was correct. So 2 would have been the hidden random number. I'm just going to test it one more time. 1 and 1. Nothing. 2. Nothing. 3. 3 was correct. So you can see there it's random. I can't predict what the number is going to be. But now we're going to incorporate some new code from part 2. We're now going to incorporate an else if. Putting the two words together, it joins this part of the code with the first if together. But now I need another test right here. So else if guess 1 is less than number 1. Now it's put a new test in, a different test. The first test, are they equal? This one means it's less than number 1. Okay? So I'm going to give the user a hint about this. They didn't get it, but I'm going to give them a hint. And I'm going to say to LBL first dot text that they guessed the number was too low. And now I'm going to test that piece of my else if code. So this time I'm going to put a very high number in here. I'm going to put the number 5 right here. This number doesn't matter yet. And I'm going to guess. Whoops. I should put the lower number in. So I guess I'm going to get 1 and a 1. That's too low. How about a 2? That's too low. How about a 3? That's still too low. How about a 4? 4 was correct. Okay. So you might guess what the next piece is. We're going to create another else if down here. Okay. Now here's again where copy paste can come in handy. I'm going to copy this piece of code that is the else if, and I'm going to paste it right underneath. I'm going to get rid of the comment, and I'm going to swap this symbol from less than to greater than, and I'm going to change my hint to too high. So now you can see here, I've got a 3-part if statement. If this, else if this, else if this. In this one, I changed it to a greater than symbol, and I'm telling the user that they guessed too high. So I'm giving them lots of hints each time. So now you can see if I put in a 1, that's too low. If I put in a 5, that's too high. So it's really giving me some good clues as to what I can guess there. So that's the first part of this. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to put in a giant comment right here that I'm going to copy and paste from where I'm going to show you guys you can get these comments from if you want to put them in your example. So here's where. If you go back to our website for where I showed you, so if you go to examples and then you go to the conditional statements example, or this is the part I'm going to show you, just the code. But even if you go to this part of the example, you can also find just the code right here. Okay. Once you click on that thing, this is just the code. So notice it's the exact same code I'm typing right now. And you can go and get this particular comment that I just got for your own example if you want, by literally copying it and pasting it right into your example. So what I'm doing here is I'm just describing what an else if is, because that was the new stuff in this second half of the unit. Else if allows the code to make multiple decisions or multiple conditions. You can add as many else ifs as you want to an else if statement. In the previous one, we put 2 else ifs in. Each has its own test, a separate test. And then, as you're going to see later in our example, you have an option to also add an else at the bottom, but that's not necessary. You'll notice up here, we didn't put the word else. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do all of this code over again, all of it, except we're going to switch guess 1 to guess 2, number 1 to number 2, LBL first to LBL second. But I'm going to give you guys a great tip for doing this. And it's not just for computer science. This is a tip that if you don't know this tip now, it might be really handy to know this for lots of your courses. Specifically courses where you'd have to write a lot of stuff, like say an essay for a history class or an English class. So let's say you wrote a long essay. Right? So you have this long essay that you wrote, okay? You might be wondering how I did that. Oh, you should learn some computer science. Anyway, so you have this long essay, and you wrote this essay, and you realized that at one point after writing a long essay, that a word within your essay, let's say that was your teacher's name, Mr. Header or Miss Header. You misspelled it. Oh, no, it's Mr. Headley, not Mr. Header. So you change it, Headley, but maybe you missed. So now you'd have to read through your whole essay to find all the places where you put this word and switch it to that. That's a lot of work for you to do that for 5 pages of an essay. Not if you know the next trick I'm about to show you. This trick is built into lots of programs, even programs as simple as Windows Notepad. So just for 1 second, I'm going to copy and paste this essay into Windows Notepad. Even Windows Notepad has this feature built in. It's often found under the Edit menu, and it's the command to replace something. Okay? It's in Visual Studio as well. Visual Studio, if you look through, okay? Hang on, let's try that again. Right here, they just call it find and replace. Okay, here, find and replace. But it's in Windows Notepad, and it's also in Microsoft Word. And there's actually, just like with copy paste, a keyboard command to do this. So just like, and I'm putting this in as a comment, Control C is copy, Control V is paste, Control H is find and replace. Control F is just find. Watch how easy this is in this one, in Windows Notepad. Control H, find header, replace with Headley. So I'm finding all the places where the word header exists and replacing with Headley. I can replace one of them, or I can replace all of them at once. And that worked really well. And I can do it in Microsoft Word as well. Control H, find header, replace with Headley. Some programs offer even more features that you can do with this find and replace. Like in Microsoft Word, you can make sure it's in the same upper and lowercase. There's lots of little things you can do with Microsoft Word that you can't maybe do with other ones, but I can do them. And in Microsoft Word, it told me it did it 28 times. That's really handy because I wouldn't have wanted to search through my essay to find all 28 places and possibly miss one. Okay? So that's a really handy feature to know, that every place now that the word header was, it's replaced it with the word Headley. Just as an example. So find and replace is, believe it or not, something that you could probably use in lots of courses. Well, let's try it in this course. I'm going to select all this code for the first if statement, copy it. I'm then going to select all that code. Why am I selecting it? So I don't find and replace through the entire document. And I'm going to press Control H. Notice it automatically says that it will only search through the selection of code. If I change that, I could look through the entire project. I don't want to do that, just in case I replace it in places I don't want to replace it. So I'm going to replace the word guess one with the word guess two. And notice how in Visual Studio it even highlights what it's about to do. It's about to replace these three words with guess two. And over here, I can replace one at a time or replace them all. I can do the exact same thing with number one, replace with number two, and replace them all. How about me replacing LBL first, LBL second, and I'm done. So that's a little tip that for those of you who don't like typing and typing and typing, that's a fast way to get that exact same logic in again. So before we finish this example up, let's see how that worked. So I'm going to put in a 1 and a 1. This one's too low. This one's too low. So how about a 5 and a 3? Oh, I got it. Believe it or not, those were the two numbers. Okay. So it's now giving me hints for both the first number and the second number. All right, we're not done yet. We still got a little more work to do. But again, if you're finding this, you can go and grab all that code as well right off this page, or you can just keep scrolling down here and you'd see the exact same code here, minus a lot of the comments and the exact same code here. Okay. All right, speaker check. Any questions before we wrap this up? And I'm just going to do an attendance check to see if some of my students who were marked absent eventually made it to the class. And it looks like the answer is still no. So I will just submit. So just missing Barrett today. All right. So let's wrap up this example now. We've got a little bit more to do. So what we're going to do next is we're going to see if we're done. We're going to check to see if we're done. In other words, we got both of them. We got both of these numbers. We're going to use some combined logic. This was something I showed in the presentation yesterday. It's an option you can do. If, another if statement, got first equals true, and it's a double equal sign. So that means I got the first number and got second equals true. So here you see the first example of using this symbol right here. Okay, and what that symbol is, the symbol, two ampersands, that means is it means the word and logically. And what that means, okay, is it, oh, my typing skills are already on the weekend. Both things have to be true. Okay, both have to be true for the entire test to be true. Okay. So and means this has to be true and this has to be true. Okay. So if they get them both right, then we're done here. Message box dot show you win. And let's shut everything down. Application. Oops. Exit. This is also code you should know. So I'm going to show them a little message box saying they win, and I'm going to shut everything down. But before I test this, I'm now going to move into an else if. And I'm going to use the same logic right here. So a little copy, paste. But I'm going to change this symbol right here to 2 vertical lines. If you're wondering where that symbol is, if you're having trouble finding that symbol, it's just above the Enter key, but you have to hold Shift. Now, what this symbol means, I'm going to sort of pick up the pace here a little bit. That symbol means or. That means either can be true. They don't have to both be true, as long as one of them is true. So either this one is true or this one is true. Either of them can be true. So I'm not going to shut down the program, but I am going to, once again, give a message box. Oh. And I'm going to say you got one. You got one of them. I'm not going to say which one. Okay. But I'm also going to count this as a guess. So I'm going to say guesses plus 1. This is also a line of code that you will use in the first programming problem, and we did it in the first example, to add 1 to a running variable. And then lastly, I'm going to say else, and I'm going to put that same line in again. Guesses equals guesses plus 1. What would the else be? Well, think about it. They either got both of them, they got one of them, or they got neither. They got neither one of them right. The final line of code of this example, the very last line, okay, is we're going to display to our users the guesses. The user needs to know how many guesses they've made in this program. So I'm going to display that to them by saying LBL number dot text equals number of guesses equals guesses. Okay, let's put this to the test. Let's see how good of a guessing game we've got here. Time to guess. I'm going to guess 1 and 1. Too low. Okay, so I'm going to guess 5 and 3. Both too high. I'm going to guess 2. Okay, I got that one right. Got 1. I'm going to guess 4. Still only got 1. How about 3? No, how about 2? Correct. Okay, 5 guesses. And why is it not shutting down? Oh, kids, what did I screw up? Oh, I know what I screwed up. When I replaced the code in the second one, this should be not got first, but got second. I missed, whoops. I missed a piece there. My apologies. In the second one that I copied and pasted, I talked too quickly. I forgot to change that to the word got second. All right, let's try it again. I had a bug in my code. Time to see if the bug is fixed. 1 and 1. I got 1. How about 1 and 3? You win. And it shuts down. So that only took 2 guesses. And kids, that will now mark the end of that example. And as well in the notes, all of this same stuff is in there as well. You can look through the notes or previous videos of me teaching this where you will find the exact same code and it's got some explanations in it, minus a lot of the comments and stuff in there. And then it just sort of goes through the rest of the code. Hopefully this will help you as you go on to solve these programming problems all of next week, okay? Because all of next week is going to be work classes. Well, that's it. That's it for this week of remote learning, a full week of remote learning. It was some work classes and then 2 days of this big part 2 of conditional statements. Next week's going to be all work classes. And I know it's a shortened week because we're about to go to a long weekend, everybody. So I'm going to say goodbye to you guys right now, and you're going to be able to log off for the weekend. Remember, you can email me. I may not be on my email all weekend because it's my long weekend too, but I will check it. And I'm also available at 3 o'clock today if you have any specific questions. You may have seen on that little screen at the start of the class, the goal for this week was to try to resolve any technical troubles. So hopefully you've all got something working at home that you can do some kind of work. The goal for next week will be to try to get some of that work handed in, okay? Ultimately, what would I like to see? I'd like to see you guys handing in the majority of your conditional statements work by the end of next week, that you've got this unit kind of done up. But that might be a bit fast for some of you, for a lot of you, okay? But that's what the goal will be for next week. I realize some of you haven't even started this unit and might even still be working well back into the variables unit. This now is an indicator that you need to pick it up a little bit. If you want some help with any of that, please let me know how I can help, okay? Because I can help. It's my job. All right, everybody, so I'm going to say goodbye now, but before I do, it is Friday, so I'm going to make the offer for the bad joke of the week. Bad jokes of the week are by definition bad, not funny, not good, not repeated, and not explained. So if you don't like it, you don't get it, you don't hear it, it's not my fault. You have the right to, at this point, log off of Teams or mute your speaker, and you won't even hear the bad joke of the week. But for those who are staying, guy goes to the doctor and he says, "Doc, I got a problem I need some help with. I've been having the same nightmare for the last 2 weeks. I'm just having a nightmare. When I go to bed at night, I have the same dream every night. I have this dream that I'm a muffler at the end of a big old muscle car. So I go to sleep and I have this dream I'm a muffler. Next night I go to sleep, I have this dream I'm a muffler. Every night when I go to sleep, I have a dream that I'm a muffler." Doctor says, "Oh, yeah, okay. I don't get it. What's the problem with that?" Guy says, "Well, when I wake up, I'm exhausted." All right, everybody, have a good week. I'm going to turn off the recording now, which will be up on our class website shortly.